Hey friends, it's Laurie. Thanks so much for stopping by. Today I'm making 3 bird-inspired DIYs. I used mostly Dollar Tree supplies along with some things that I had on hand. I really hope you enjoy making them with me, so let's get busy. Getting started, I'm using some pine cones. I picked up the long, thin, and the short little stubby ones in my yard. I basically live in a pine forest, so these are pretty much everywhere. Before I use them to dry out the sap, I'm placing mine single layer in a 200-degree oven for about 30 minutes. The other 3 pine cones that I'm using are from a bag of cinnamon pine cones that I use during the holidays, but you can use any type of pine cones for this project. Using my clippers, I'm first starting with my long pine cones, and I'm cutting up about 3 inches from the bottom. Once I have it shortened, I'm then removing some of the scales from the top to expose the center stem, and this will become the center of my flower. To make another flower, I'm now using the top piece of my cut pine cone. Once again, I'm pulling away the scales to reveal a small center stem. I'm now using my smaller pine cones and I'm pulling away the scales about halfway down. These are a bit spiky and a little more difficult, but I just kept working at it till I snipped off the top. Just like my other pine cone, I'm pulling away the scales on the sides. The middle of this pine cone is much larger, and once again, it will become the center of my flower. The bottom of these pine cones make really pretty flowers as well. Using my clippers, I'm cutting about 2 inches up from the bottom, and instead of revealing the center, this time I'm just cutting it straight across. If you find that some of the pine cones are a bit spiky, definitely wear a pair of protective gloves while you're doing this. Now that I'm done, the bottom of this pine cone will make another pretty flower for the bunch. For my cinnamon pine cones, they smelled really good while I was working with them, but they were super tough. Just like my smaller pine cones, I'm also using the bottoms of these as flowers. For one of the pine cones, I'm cutting down about halfway and pulling away those side scales to give my flower a raised center. Now that I have them all cut, I'll be turning my pine cones into flowers. You can use different colors of spray paint. It works really well. I used it on 2 pine cone wreaths that I made, and I'll have them linked below in case you'd like to check them out. Because I don't have an assortment of spray paint, I'll be painting my flowers with some different colors of acrylic paint. I decided what colors I wanted to paint them, and I did my best to get in between all those little nooks and crannies. I did leave a small open space on the top of each of them to add in a different center color. I painted the bottom of 2 of my smaller pine cones and left open the area where it was attached to the tree. Now that they're all painted and dry, I'm adding in 3 different colors of acrylic paint to the centers. I didn't have any specific color planned for each flower. I just kind of randomly added them as I worked along. With all my flowers painted and dry, this next step is completely optional, but I'm giving mine a coat of clear spray paint. Mine is a matte finish and it's giving my flowers a bit of a shine and it's helping to pop those colors. To make the base for my sign, I'm using a piece of wood from the Dollar Tree and it measures 5.5 by 11 inches. I'm using the same sage green paint that I used for the center of my flowers, and I'm giving the top a coat. Now that it's dry, I'm adding a hanger onto the back, and I'm using a piece of cord that I had on hand. I decided how long I wanted my hanger to be and clipped the cord to size. To attach it to the back, I'm using some E6000 along with my glue gun. I added a line of hot glue down on each side and then added on some E6000. I then attached my two hangers. The hot glue will set it up quickly while the E6000 will set it up permanently. For the front of my sign, I'm using these two fence pieces from the Dollar Tree. I removed the stickers attached to each back, and then I also used my clippers to remove both of the jute hangers. With that complete, I used some white acrylic paint and gave both of the fence pieces a coat. Now that they're dry, I'm giving them a bit of a rustic appearance by shading them with my pencil. Using the side of my pencil, I'm following the lines on the fence, and once I do, I'm then rubbing them in with my finger. If you prefer to have a bright white fence, just omit this step. Now that they both have accents, it's time to attach them to the board. I added some E6000 onto the back of the fence supports and then centered them both on the board. I let it set up for a couple of hours, and now I'm finding the placement of my pine cone flowers on the fence. I had no set plans on where I was placing them, and I did move them around a bit. Happy with their placement, I'm now attaching each one to the fence using my glue gun. As I was attaching them, I did overlap them slightly to give them more of that flower garden appearance. With them all attached in place, I'm now going to add on some stems. I'm using some flower bunches from the Dollar Tree where I had used the flowers but not the stems. I had an assortment of different greens, and I just used my clippers and cut each free from the main stem. Attaching them to the flowers, I'm using my E6000 instead of my glue gun. I'm adding some to the end of one stem and tucking it up under the flower. As I was adding them, if they were too long, I just snipped them off to the right size, and even once I had them in place, if I noticed they were hanging off the end a bit, I just clipped them off then as well. The reason I'm using E6000 to attach them instead of hot glue is because I can control where the glue is going. I was afraid if I used my glue gun, I might have globs of glue stuck under the flowers. I used extra flower stems for my project, but you can pretty much use anything you have on hand. Some dowels or thick wire, or even some straight sticks that you picked up from outside. With all my stems in place, I'm adding on the word bloom, and I'm using these wooden letters from the Dollar Tree. I used the same sage green acrylic paint, and I gave each of them a coat. I used the sage green for my letters, but I think if you match the colors of one of the flowers, that would look great too. With the letters dry, I'm finding their placement by centering them on the bottom of my sign. To attach them in place, I'm using my glue gun, but Once again, you can always use E6000. You can now hang your sign as is, but if you follow me, you know I'm always into adding more accents, and I'm using some of these bumblebees that I picked up at the Dollar Tree. I'm also adding on 3 small ladybugs, and I found these on Amazon. In addition to my bees and my ladybugs, I'm adding on this pretty pink bird as my inspiration, and I picked this up at Michael's. It was on clearance for 90 cents. I'm adding my bumblebees first, placing some hot glue on the flowers, and then attaching it in place. With those in place, I'm now attaching 2 ladybugs, one to the L and one to the O on my sign. To finish up, I'm removing the clip from the bottom of my bird and attaching it to the top of my sign. And with that, this project is complete. If you're new to my channel, please consider clicking on that little red subscribe button below, leaving me a thumbs up, and to all my returning friends, you know I'm always so happy to see you. To make my bird bath, I'm starting with this small porcelain jewelry dish. Mine has a little hole in the center, and I found this at the Dollar Tree. I'm removing the label that's on the bottom. For the bird bath base, I'm using this pretty light blue candle holder. It's also porcelain and came from the Dollar Tree. In addition to those, I'm also using 2 12-inch pieces of floral wire. Using my clippers, I'm cutting each into 3 sections, and they don't all have to be even. I'm turning my cut wire into sprays of water, and I'm bending over one end so that it looks like a candy cane. I'm not sure how many will fit in the center of my bird bath, but I'm making 6 in total. I'm now using some of my blue acrylic paint, and I'm painting the wires and the center of my bird bath. I'm using the blue acrylic paint because that's what I have on hand, but if you have blue resin, I think that would work great too. With the bird bath dry, to protect the paint from scraping off, I'm giving the center a coat of gloss Mod Podge. While that's drying, I'm using the same blue acrylic paint, and I'm painting both sides of my wires. I'm adding the sprays of water to the center of my bird bath using some E6000. I placed a small dot in the center hole and then placed in as many wires as I could fit. I was hoping to add in 6, but I was able to fit 5. Some of the wires are taller than the others, but that works perfect because it looks like different sprays of water. Before I add my 2 pieces together, I'm going to decorate the base. Using some ivy and with my clippers, I'm cutting off 1 sprig. I'm adding on a couple of dots of hot glue and wrapping it around the base. I'm adding on a flower accent, and I'm using these small flowers from the top of this Dollar Tree wisteria. I used my glue gun and randomly attached them under the ivy. I'm using these small purple flowers on my project because I'm adding on a purple bird. To attach my two pieces together, I'm placing a generous amount of E6000 on the top of the base and placing down my bird bath. I let my bird bath set up for a couple of hours, and for the final accent, I'm using this pretty purple bird that I picked up at Michael's. I clipped the excess wire, added some hot glue to the side of my bird bath, and attached it in place. And with that, this sweet little bird bath is complete. Getting started, I'm using one of the wooden crates from the Dollar Tree, and I'm removing the label from the bottom. I'm adding on some feet, and I'm using 8 of the tumbling tower blocks from the Dollar Tree. I'm attaching them together in pairs, and I'm using some of my Starbond thick glue. It sets up natural wood super quick, and I do have the company linked below in case you'd like to check it out. You can also use hot glue and E6000, those will work great too. They set up in about 2 minutes, and now I'm attaching them to the bottom of the crate, once again using some of my Starbond thick glue. After adding some glue to each block, I turned my crate over and attached one on each end. I gave it a few minutes to set up, and now I'm using my white acrylic paint, giving it a complete coat, and I'm painting about halfway down on the inside. I'm not painting the middle section of the crate white because I'll be adding on a different color. I set that aside to dry, and now I'm using this wooden birdhouse cutout from the Dollar Tree. I'm using my white acrylic paint to paint the house and this pretty golden brown to paint the roof. I'll also be using 2 of the wooden craft sticks from the Dollar Tree, and I painted those white as well. With my crate dry, I added on the golden brown accent to match the birdhouse. With my 2 pieces dry, I'm using my pencil and adding on a shading accent. I'm using the side of my pencil and tracing around the lines on the birdhouse, and then rubbing it in with my fingers. I like adding on the shading because it softens up the white and it does give it a bit of a rustic appearance. This step is completely optional, and if you prefer a fresh coat of paint, just omit this step. With the birdhouse complete, I'm following the same instructions and adding the shading onto my crate. I'm using a regular pencil for my shading, but if you're looking to add in another color, you can actually use colored pencils. I've done that in the past, and that works great too. I'm adding the 2 white craft sticks to the back of my planter, but I used my pencil and gave them some shading as well. With all my pieces complete, it's time to attach them together. I'll be using some E6000 along with my glue gun. I added some hot glue to the back edge of my crate and then followed it up with some E6000. I then attached the birdhouse and held it in place for a couple of seconds. The hot glue will set it up and the E6000 will hold it permanently. On the back of my planter, I added 2 lines of hot glue, followed it up with 2 lines of E6000, and then attached my 2 craft sticks. Both of these will act as supports to help hold my birdhouse in place. For my planter, I'm adding in 3 succulents from the Dollar Tree and a couple of pieces of greenery that I had on hand. Because my succulent pots are a little bit short, I'm placing 2 tumbling tower blocks in the bottom of my planter. I then added in my Dollar Tree succulents and the greenery. I didn't permanently attach my plants, so I have the option of changing them out. For my final accent, what is a birdhouse without a bird? I'm adding on this pretty yellow finch, and I picked this up at the Dollar Tree. I removed the clip from the bottom, added a dot of hot glue to my birdhouse, and attached it in place. And with that, this cute succulent planter is ready to display. Here we are at the end of the video, and I really hope you enjoyed making these bird-inspired DIYs with me. If you're new to my channel and you're thinking, hey, I'd like to come back and hang out with her again, don't forget to click that little red subscribe button below. If you're looking for more home decor ideas, I'll have some linked for you at the end of this video. I hope you all have an amazing day, and I will see you soon. Bye, everybody!